Welcome again to the Sustainability Podcast. I'm very excited to be here today with John Harrington and Torey Penrod-Cambra, founders of HighByte. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
We're here at the ARC 29th Annual Forum, and both John and Torey are here to talk to us today about some of their exciting solutions for the industry. But before we get started, before we go there, let me just ask, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what ecosystem are you working in today?
Go ahead.
Sure. So HighByte is an industrial software company. We work in an area that we classify as industrial data ops. And essentially that means data preparation and making sure that industrial data is AI ready. We work with customers across 20 different sub-vertical markets in industrial, everything from tier one automotives to pharmaceutical and oil and gas. So our customer breadth is pretty wide, but what we see is many of their challenges are still the same regardless of industry.
That's super. It sounds like a very exciting effort that you're leading. What challenges are you attempting or are you satisfying?
So there were a number of presentations here at the event talking about AI. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone wants to leverage AI and use AI.
Certainly.
AI needs data. Data is the fuel or the food for AI to work. And one of the biggest problems in industrial is that we need high quality data. We need it orchestrated from lots of different systems. We need to govern it. We need to secure it. And a lot of times that AI is could be running in the cloud, could be running in the edge, it could be running anywhere. So we need to deliver it to wherever it needs to be. And that's where data ops really comes into play. It's focused on providing governance, providing orchestration of data, high quality standardization of data, observability of data. So that's really what we solve, is that data piece, so that all those AI applications that we see and hear about can then work effectively.
Well, let me ask this, perhaps for the uninitiated. Your software ingests probably some unformatted data.
Yep.
And out the other end comes some formatted data with
Exactly.
engineering units and legal ranges and things like
Exactly.
that. How does that happen? How does that work internally? What's the magic?
That's the magic. No, so you can't. We provide a user interface so that the OT team can batch that data together, can pull it together from multiple different systems. So a lot of times, you get the telemetry data from the OPC servers or from the SCADA system, but then you may want to mix that with MES data or CMMS data, depending on how you're planning on using it. So we provide the companies with the tooling so that they can do that really easily and at scale. So they can very easily say, I want this data point and that data point and these from the pump. I want these data points from my CMMS so I know who the vendor is and I know when we last serviced it. And then I put it together into a data set or data payload, and then I'm going to send that up to the cloud to be stored in Snowflake or in Amazon's S3 or something. And then the AI works on top of that. So if we can do that to the data and we can add all this context around it, then the AI is going to work a lot better with a lot less data and a lot less power. And that's really where the future is, if we can deliver that. And then you got to roll it out across the entire enterprise.
And John just made such a good point too. He's, really articulated well the what of what it is doing and how we are doing it. I think the who is really interesting also. And by that, he was talking about, the controls or the process engineer on the plant floor. So I think what's really critical with data is putting the tooling in the hand of the domain expert. So that means doing the contextualization close to the data source, where you have a domain expert who understands the context for that data, can add data either automatically or manually, depending on how that needs to be done. And then that data, that contextualized payload, can then be sent to the enterprise that may have less contextual knowledge of what's actually happening on the plant floor, but now they have data that has context in it and is ready to use. So it's really critical, not just the what and the how, but the who you're giving these tools to in order to make them most successful.
Which spans IT and OT. and that's where the value is, right? So in fact, it even goes beyond IT. It goes to the business user. So the business user knows what data they want, so we could collect information from them. The IT team has to maintain and deploy the solution because we're ultimately getting data into their domain. And then the OT team, as Torey said, needs to contextualize it. So it really, from a data perspective, it spans the IT and OT. And then from a user perspective, it spans both IT and OT so that they can work together and collaborate.
Here at ARC, we've written quite a bit about industrial data fabrics.
Yes.
Would you say that the output is, in fact, an industrial data fabric?
I would say that a data fabric is an architectural pattern that our solution could be used within. Okay, so think of that as like a plan of I create a fabric to move data, and our solution, the HighByte Intelligence Hub, is the movement piece. It collects it from these systems, it contextualizes it, and it lands it in the target system. That whole thing is your fabric.
And we always think of a fabric too, I think, as often as an ecosystem of best of breed partners working together to deliver a data fabric from the shop floor all the way up to the cloud and back again.
Well, and part of my thinking there in posing that question was, is your scope of market simply process control companies, or do you also roll in all the supply chain participants? Do you roll in weather information or things like that?
So we haven't gotten a lot into, well, it kind of depends on how you define supply chain. We actually work with some pharmaceutical companies who they're using contract manufacturers, and the contract manufacturer has to provide data to the OEM. So we can be used for that. Or we have a paper company who is using sensors to monitor their facility, the fields, and the sensor data is being backhauled by the company, but then we're pulling it out of their platform and then landing it back in the Pi system on-prem so that they can land that data with all of their industrial automation data. So it really, like every company at the show, our software can work with. In fact, many of those companies are partners of ours, like Hive and Inductive Automation and MaintainX and Siemens. And we're also partnered with Amazon and Snowflake and Microsoft. So all these different companies, they're providing the application that either creates data or uses data. We're providing the movement piece so that a company can use 5 of those applications or 25 of them, and the data can move across them, and they can manage that at scale.
Well, this sounds very good intuitively. Can you cite perhaps some examples of solutions that solved an actual business problem?
Yes. Yeah, one of our customers is Lindt Chocolate, okay? And they did a webinar with us a little while ago, and they talk about how they've got cameras on the factory floor that are taking pictures, and they need to pull that data out, and then they need to move that data, the image, to the cloud to be analyzed by a specialty application that's designed for analyzing chocolate in production. And then they need to provide that data back down to the shop floor. Just trying to think what other customers, we work with pulp and paper companies. We work with
like Georgia Pacific and renewables, like Siemens Gamesa, part of Siemens Energy.
Oh, wow.
So
they're laying out a wind turbine, and they need to collect data on that wind turbine as it's being produced, because there's a big fiberglass curing process as part of building a wind turbine, and they need to collect the data so they make sure that it's high quality. So it's anything from that to food and beverage companies. We work with a number of food and beverage companies. We work with a number of pharmaceutical, oil and gas, automotive. Yeah, it's a really wide range of use cases, from predictive maintenance to quality to production
to simulation twins.
Simulation, yeah.
So again, it's a data cleaning, formatting, and transport.
Yeah,
and
orchestration.
Mechanism. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that if you think about is just more and more applications that want data, and if we continue to connect each one of them, the number of connections that we're maintaining is growing exponentially. But if you can have a hub in the middle that orchestrates the data between all of them, then if you add a new one, you only add one more connection. You don't add 1,000 more connections, right? Or possible connections. And that one connection provides it access to all the data. In fact, we even expose all the data over REST API if someone wants to query through, so they can get access to all of their AspenTech data, IP21 data at one site, and all of their Pi data at another site, and pull that data up and land it wherever they need.
Because when it comes down to it, all those Industry 4.0 use cases, the AI application use cases, it all comes back to two core problems with industrial data. That's either the data lacks context or the system architecture is messy. And if you can solve those two pieces, then you can start to put a data foundation in place that will allow you to do more advanced use cases like generative or agentic AI.
Great. What do you see for the future?
The uses of data are growing exponentially, right? They were talking yesterday about agentic AI. And so now we're going to have thousands or tens of thousands of agents running everywhere, helping all of us out. But every single one of them needs to be fed. And the feeding is data. Data is the food for AI. So, it just, the challenges of moving data is growing, but it's also, we see that as just an opportunity. So it's exciting.
Well, John and Torey, this has been a fascinating discussion. Let me ask you, do you have any last comments for our audience?
I think one thing that I saw this week, and that, of course I'm biased, but it resonates with me a lot, is, and I said it before, I'll say it again, is around data foundation. I think Mike Carroll, who's formerly with Georgia Pacific, is here this week and said, you got to eat your vegetables. And I thought, yeah, that's right. Like you still have to do the work, right? You have to lay the foundation. You have to get your architecture in place. You have to get your team digitally literate. You still have to do the work. AI isn't magic, not quite. So it means that the data foundation is still so important, and I hope everyone takes that seriously, because that's going to be work that's worth the reward.
Yeah.
How does someone, one of our listeners, reach out to you?
Sure.
HighByte.com.
HighByte.com.
All right.
Or find us on LinkedIn. We have very active LinkedIn. We have very active YouTube, and HighByte.com.
Well, again, our guests today have been John Harrington and Torey Penrod-Cambra of HighByte. Thank you again for joining us for this insightful discussion, and we'll see you again on another episode of the podcast.